Yeah, I guess that's my real problem is I really don't know if I understand what he means by it. Because he does it so quick. He almost says it in a shorthanded way. Like he almost expects you to know what metaphysical evil is. And I'm not sure I totally get it.
And we're live.
Yeah, I guess that's my real problem.
Hey. We can hear ourselves, so that's a good sign,
that's
right?
Good. The speakers are on.
All right, I'm going to turn them off now. And we will get ready to get this going.
Oh, so that's how you know you've got it on.
Yeah, we just want to make sure it all works out well. All right. So here we are. I'm Ryan. This is Darlene. Well, this is the Napa Jordan Peterson podcast. I don't know what episode this is, but this is March 19th, 2000, or March 23rd, 2009. Helps if I get the date right, not flip the date with the year. And this week we did the Jordan Peterson Biblical Series Part 2. And this is, I think, the 8th or 9th time we've gone over a segment from it. So we're still slogging our way through Part 2. We did about, I don't know, about a 20-minute chunk this week.
It was really satisfying, a group. I came in late, so you'll have to, but I thought it was a really great group. So I was a little bit late. So where did you guys start?
We started with metaphysical evil. And tried to find, me and Ria weren't really clear on what metaphysical evil was. So we looked at metaphysical, and it's kind of like metaphysical evil. The way we determined it was like, what evil is actually there? What is it like and such? So, like, we all live our lives. Do we actually see evil? Can we actually touch it, feel it? You know, is it an action that we can observe? So that's what he's talking about when he talks about metaphysical evil, like observable evil, kind of, in a way.
Because you can only observe it, but the fact that it's metaphysical means it's kind of like an idea. I guess that's where I'm having trouble figuring it out.
Yeah, it's not exactly tangible, but it's like you said, maybe like an action, something you can observe, or a pattern that you have to have, senses developed enough to see, so to speak. And he also said that evil is easier to believe than good, which I thought was a real interesting point, because I know human beings were loss averse, so that kind of makes some sense that we're more sensitive to things going wrong than things going right. But it's not really going right. It's like when evil's happening, it's more obvious that, something's wrong here, something's off, versus, oh, they did a good thing. Well, everyone's supposed to do a good thing, It's like not as noticeable sometimes than like, wow, they did an amazingly good thing. That was nice of them. That if you see something heinously wrong, you know it.
Oh yeah, and so you just don't pay much attention to something that's good, or you don't focus.
Yeah,
on that?
It's easier to ignore maybe. The
signal. But dang, that guy just ran over the dog and didn't even stop, or so that's like, or hit the lady with the car and just kept going, hit and run. Then you're like, oh, that's bad. That's a bad thing to do. Yeah, knowing that they're vulnerable in the ways that we're vulnerable, and someone exploiting that, you can kind of tell that they've crossed the line. And that's why it's easier to believe. You see, I guess, how is he using belief there? Yeah, and I think that's probably where the metaphysical connects in, too, because, what is evil, what is good? It's kind of hard things you have to define, and you might take some wisdom, and it's not necessarily something you can put in book learning, right? Intelligence. Though I know maybe you can, too. It's still debatable to a certain extent, but the fact that you can observe it and see it and feel it, you can at least start to address it. Interesting. Kind of lost my train of thought a little bit. Yeah. Maybe it'll come back. Right. And then we moved on to definitions of kin and kind to see if they were root words in one another because of the biblical verses, since it is going over Genesis. Kept using the word kind over and over again. Oh. So we looked into the links, and if I remember correctly, they did have a link. Do you remember what of your own kind? So it's like of your family, and that's what it could be referencing to. And kin is that family also? So kin. Yeah, kin is definitely family. So that's family, and kind is also kind of family. Yeah, where were the passage of Genesis? Was this where man was? We were around 24 to 26. Those are the only numbers I really remember. Were they were like naming the animals, or they were like, do you remember? No, we were just talking of their own kind. This one was, they had mentioned the fruits and the seeds 2 weeks ago, and this week was more about the people, I think. Okay.
I do like how he goes back and forth from the Bible and kind of says there's different stories going on here. You know, like he makes it clear like there is other stories where Eve is taken from Adam's rib. You know, and it comes woman of man. But then in this account that he's talking about, they're separate. It's like it's a separate kind of way of being. He talks.
Yeah, it doesn't really touch on that.
Right. Yeah, they're different. Yeah, they're more autonomous. Sorry, is that I came in when you guys talked about the Old Testament divinity and the moralistic view somehow being arbitrary, and
yeah, it's probably right after evil is easy to believe. We talked about how maybe like nihilism can poison your existence, was something I think he said. You know, it just can put you in this downward spiral. That if you're not oriented upward or aiming to not improve your own life but others' lives, that it's very easy to, you know, poison yourself. And it's just like that. It's like by not acting as if you can make your life much harder and the lives around others around you much harder, even though it might be expedient in the short term for yourself.
So by not acting as if there's a moral imperative or acting as if good is valuable, that somehow you poison everything around you? Is that... I'm not quite sure.
Well, he says you poison your existence, so yeah, you could. What he means by existence is not necessarily clear, but it could be, you know, your entire efforts you've put forth so far, and you know, once you're poisoned, it can. If you take too much poison, it's not recoverable, right? It just can poison the whole thing. So, you know, there's some type of balance that has to be struck.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about because I think in the book he talks about this thing that what is it? It's better to do something that's of value, or I can't remember.
Meaning usually.
Yeah, meaning rather than what's expedient. Right. So that's like and that's kind of like that's where you can stumble into evil, because you start doing things that are expedient without meaning, and then you can kind of like fall into bad habits at them.
Yeah, in the book he talks about how a lie is like a procrastination. It's delaying something so you have to deal with it later. And you can keep lying and keep putting it off, keep building a web, but eventually, one point or other, you're gonna have to deal with it, and you know, it's just like a form of procrastination. Where we're all lazy. We don't necessarily want to deal with everything right now and then, whether it's fear, insecurity, or just too tired, right?
Right. Or even like I know in the book he talks about that one part too, where the person they're trying to get out of the psychological ward or something that they're visiting, and a patient comes up to them, and he had really been practicing trying to speak truth.
Yeah.
And so then there were several expedient ways of explaining why she couldn't go with them, but he chose to say something that in the moment was more hurtful. Oh, you know, we're a university group or whatever, and so you can't come with us. But he said he felt like she understood that better. It was accepted better, and it changed. You know, she had a little moment of hurt, but then it was more appropriate.
Yeah,
so this is like also speaking very precisely with your language, because I do think I would probably just say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we're just going to go outside here," or you know, or you can't join us for some. And it wouldn't be a horrible lie, but I guess it'd be a bit of a white lie. That'd be softer for the person.
Yeah.
But that also, I guess, steals the person's dignity, I suppose.
Well, and he also implies that they can tell when you're lying, right? You kind of have this feeling whether you're being lied to or not. He has the example of his drunk neighbor that keeps coming over.
Right.
And when he decides to tell him off truthfully, it could be very, very bad for him. But it worked out. And his neighbor remembered the incident, even though he was very drunk, and it never happened again. So there's this sense that people have that can tell if you're telling the truth or not. And that's why I think there's a lot of new media that's replacing old media right now, because you turn on the TV networks and a lot of people feel like they're being lied to, or it's not being truthful, whether it's a sitcom and you know jokes that don't necessarily represent the world or accurately portraying what actually happens. It's too polished or too clean sometimes that it just lacks this intellectual honesty. And then you have these people that are brutally honest, like Howard Stern. It's like, why did this guy get so popular? Well, he's got this talent. He knows how to be honest, and it's compelling and interesting. he's definitely entertaining.
Yeah. And I see what you're saying, because there's a genuineness about him as well. It's not a put up.
Yeah, and
show.
That's what I think a lot of some of social media, as well as a lot of new YouTubers on the up and coming, are getting attention because they seem to be trying to portray themselves as accurate. And I think Peterson's one of them. If you watch him speak and talk on YouTube, you really get a sense of what he's grappling with and what he feels and what he's thinking. It doesn't really feel like there is any subterfuge or rouges.
It's not a canned version of himself or a polished version. Or it's like, I'm really struggling with this.
Or he's trying to preach something, so to speak, right?
That he really believes.
Yeah, and there's things he really believes in. You can see the passion he has for it. But
yeah, that's very, very true. And that's what we're kind of hungry for now, because it's just so crazy.
Yeah, it's in this day and age. There's a lot to doubt, I think, and I mean that's the whole point of the hierarchies, and whether there's a patriarchy or not. It's like we need to make sure the hierarchies that have power are accountable, and not corrupt and not tyrannical, and whether it's run by males only.
Right.
Or not, it doesn't matter. We just need to focus whether it's run correctly.
Yeah, there's a thing about Peterson that I really, really like, and that kind of comes in here and kind of grates it in our group, because I feel like he's trying to talk about what is. He's not saying that he thinks this is the best, though he does say, like, well, if you can do better, I don't know, but this is how it is. So we shouldn't try to should it and say this should be this way or shame it. We should look at what it is and kind of, I don't want to say accept it, but kind of
play with it at your own peril, I think is something.
Yeah, he says play with it at your own peril, but I think really try to understand how it is rather than trying to shame it or blame it or say it's not good and not really even stand under it, not even understand what it is.
I heard a great line today. It's like the only thing I learned in college economics was you can't just change one thing and not expect it to change everything.
Yeah, that is really great. Yeah.
So when you want to preach a certain prescription, let's say, or antidote to chaos, you really got to understand all the inner workings and the potential effects it could have, and define maybe how it actually, the things it can't change or doesn't change. It might be easier than, and you really have to weigh that holistically. And I think that's what Peterson does a great job. He's a psychologist. He does some neurology and these other disciplines.
And he's so well read. I mean, he brings up so many different views, and it's not like he's just making stuff up. He tends to really give good background.
And he pulls from the giants of the past, so he's got a lot of weight in his tool belt. And the giants of the past, I mean, they've stood the test of time, and there's nothing rougher than that. Be able to, bring ideas forth and throughout generations is very difficult. If you look at the Bible, it's a piece of information or culture that withstood destruction of kingdoms. And there was a lot of kingdoms that have been destroyed, and so people really thought it was worthwhile to share with their children, even though it might have been past part of the old kingdom. So they really thought there was value there. And that continues to this day.
Yeah. So I know when I came in, you guys were talking about that the New Testament has an insistence that we act toward God, because He is nothing but good. And because I remember that the Old Testament has that God is a arbitrary and has a moralistic side, and He was trying to cut or help us to see the difference between the God of the Old Testament and then the New Testament God and how they are juxtaposed. And I know that led to a bunch of discussion.
Yeah, we weren't sure if Jordan Peterson's simplification, how accurate that was and how precise it was. And there was some debate about how different is the Old Testament from the New Testament.
Right. And I liked how Jordan Peterson was talking about that. Earthquakes are terrible things, and they're going to happen. And they can happen with a good God, even if God is good. These terrible things happen. But we have to act with courage and faith, because being good is a decision. So we act as if God is good. And that's what you were talking before, right? You always have to act as if God is good.
Yeah, I think Peterson tries to make the argument that we get the best outcomes as when we pretend as if.
Mm-hmm. That good is valuable too. That God is good, right? That there even is a God. Whether you believe in God as a metaphysical being, but to believe that there is a structure or something that draws us to a higher self, that's good. Yeah. Oh yeah, he said evil is easier to believe because the 20th century has been so evil. And that was another thing that I know that caused some debate. And I think that you handled that really great because we talked about, well, the perception, at least, we know that have documented the 20th century.
Yeah. There's obviously been horrible things pre-20th century.
Like Genghis Khan.
But the 20th century, we still have people that lived through it that can access that information. And we have more written because we had printing and all sorts of stuff. So.
And there's like eyewitness accounts too. There's people who have lived through it, or who, like you say, who have
There's probably more eyewitness accounts because there's eyewitness accounts of the other events too sometimes.
But they're more relatable to us because they were our grandfathers.
Yeah, they're closer to us.
Yeah, they're, or my father tells stories, that when he served in the military, he was very young when he served, but still like how these things were. So it's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, and Peterson says we're at our own peril, ignoring those evils and not really reflecting on them and to figure out what went so wrong and really put some emphasis to prevent that in the future.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah, I'm just looking here.
He also talked about how God might be in our brain, so to speak. He had the picture of Michelangelo did.
Yeah, and I love that because he says, so we're looking at God as an old man in the sky, and as a kind of, if we think of God as a divine disembodied being, he said really he thinks that the old man in the sky is not a premature or a primitive way of looking at God. Because it's much more complicated. Nothing's more complicated than a human being itself, and even as they do AI, the artificial intelligence, and how are you going to be able to put artificial intelligence? You almost have to have it in a body. You can't have it disembodied. So it's not that we can't even understand a disembodied being, but that the body itself has value. And he talked about the resurrection too.
Well, in the beginning too, he talked about how the senses play into consciousness. So if you cut off a limb and you're less senses, you're less conscious in a way, right? So it's very complicated. I also like how he said the divinity is in us, it's inside of us, and I think the Bible tries to make that connection too, that there's something divine inside of us and that we need to try to access it and bring it out to empower us or motivate us, or I don't.
And that's why Jesus's resurrection, bodily resurrection, I remember this in the Peterson, that is very important because it enables the idea of the body and that God can be wise and embodied, and that somehow this body is not just something that we can take off and throw away. It's not like a pair of jeans that has no meaning, that the physical world itself has meaning to it and is important. And so that was like, yeah, I really liked that because he says that was one of the things, the resurrection of the body. And that is true because Christ does say that, in the New Testament. So it gives a lot of honor to the body. Oh, I know what I have on here that he was saying. What was it? That the voluntary acceptance of morality. And if you, with the attitude towards it. So that the courage and faith is a decision that gives you a transformative attitude. But if you think, oh, we're all going to die anyway and it doesn't have any meaning, then you've poisoned your existence. And he was likening this to an on or off switch. There's not really like a midway here. If you have that belief, it affects everything. You're kind of like in the darkness, or maybe that's evil.
Probably jumped ahead earlier then. Oh. Yeah, God is in our brain. I have here, we eventually talked about resentment, and the answer isn't to toughen up. I don't really remember that conversation. Oh, one of the things I liked we mentioned was mother is access to the king.
Yes,
They talked about in older times that one of the ways to get the king to change his mind was to go see his mother and have a conversation with her. And
because if the mother invites you in, or the mother can then talk to the son, where the son might be no way, but because it's a request through his mother, he won't usually deny the the idea of sovereignty and where it came from.
Yeah, and I think it was trying to show the balance between female and male. You know, each do have equal power. But that's interesting how that kind of fell away a little bit, or at least forgotten about. No one talks about it.
Right.
But maybe that's along the lines of, like, we don't want to build a society of strong negotiators or intelligent people because we want soldiers and workers, right?
Right. That's kind of scary. Yeah, and I think that came about because we were talking about the idea that, because there's some folks in our group that really like to say, well, why would the feminists accept this? And I kind of feel like I'm a feminist, but I'm not as offended as I think other people think I should be.
There's
so
like
I'm
different.
Not quite sure.
There's different waves of feminism, like first wave, second wave, but then like third, fourth. I don't know if there's a fifth now. But yeah, it seems to, as we make progress, you know, obviously you got to make sure the pendulum doesn't swing too far, and some of these newer waves are obviously a bit more radical or more extreme than the original goals. So it's kind of a weird world where there are people that say that. Equality was that word, egalitarianism isn't enough, right? Because you have to account for historical wrongs.
Oh, how can you ever fix that?
Yeah, and that's the big question, and until we can explain how it could ever be enough, I think it's going to be a huge problem. And someone made a tweet recently. It was more about the slavery reparations thing. He's like, I believe in reparations. Anyone that was a slave should get reparations for anyone that owned a slave. And he's just kind of highlighting that no one currently lived the life. Well, no one in the majority. I mean, there are plenty of slaves right now, mainly sex slaves. I mean, slavery is just as popular in the world as it was 100 years ago. Sadly, it's just changed demographics, so to speak. But in popular culture, when we talk about reparations,
right, but the people who actually own the slaves are dead, and the people who were like back from Civil War era, those people have passed. But the problem is that so many houses were built on it, so there's so much wealth that came out of it.
And you can say there's all this damage it caused, and how can you ever fix some of that? Now everyone's off on different footings, and should we apply, you know, different standards, you know, like affirmative action to set it up? And it's a really good debate. It's hard to get answers to that, mainly because everyone's got maybe a bad understanding of the term, so the two sides always have get off to the wrong foot because of different worldviews, and it's hard to get one side to talk in the other's language.
Oh, that's such a great way of putting it. Yeah, because I think that's really true. Like, I feel like that's a big stumbling block with Peterson. You know, even in our group, is sometimes people read the same thing, and I don't know that we're all hearing how he really means it.
We take a word and the word means different things to us, or he says a word and we interpret it different ways, even though there's all sorts of things. So you got to have constant communication, debate, and truth seeking, and that's the part of Peterson I really like.
And that's why this is really good, even the debriefing part. But even to read the book on your own, you would stand back and get something different. That's why I love doing the conversations as we're watching it and then talking about it in the biblical series too, because everybody brings something different, and we get to have a more rich, you know, diverse understanding.
Yeah, that's why I like to spend a lot of time on Twitter too. I get to hear something from one view from one side, one view of the other, and then I can ask questions. Well, what do you mean by this? What do you mean by that?
Right.
And try to break it down further.
That's interesting. So I'm not a Twitter person because it just looks so silly.
Well,
I guess
it is
because
silly.
my real problem is because I feel like it's kind of like I don't know. You have a limit to so many words you can do for Twitter. Or
yeah, it's up to 280 now. It used to be 140.
So you can explain something in that amount of words. Yeah, I don't know
Before
why.
you actually had to be a pretty good editor.
Yeah, you had to be really concise. But I also feel like it just seems like a way to kind of jab or poke people, rather than try to actually elevate the conversation or try to have understanding.
It's very real world. It's very public, and there are no yard duties. It is very much
it's like a bar fight. It's like a bar fights, right? People, your mother has warts on her nose, or something like that.
It's the Wild West. It can get pretty tribal, especially since there are people in there that are trying to divide and conquer and try to create a diversion. Mainly, a lot of journalists, I would say, or media love to write an article that's inflammatory to get people to, if the headline's inflammatory, to get
So
people to read the
they
article.
want to polarize people.
Well, and then you have, angry mob of people that are upset because of the article on both sides of the issue. Sometimes, you have people that are angry that the other side's angry because it makes sense with their worldviews. So it's
like not people really trying to listen to each other, or I guess that
it's all the problems we have in the real world just put in a online global medium that's real time, so we can yell at anyone across the world at any point. What could go wrong?
That's a great way of putting it. Yeah, it's because I haven't been a Twitter. So, but people use it. What?
The biggest interesting thing is when an event breaks and people believe that source that's saying the event is happening is credible. People will then rebroadcast it, so you actually can hear the news spread faster on Twitter than the news, because the news is supposed to vet 2 or 3 sources.
I see.
That are direct. So
so if we'd had Twitter when Kennedy was shot, you would have had a lot more people, because Cronkite was really trying to wait to make sure he had everything verified, and then even to go along with what was the best thing
we're
to
talking
do for
minutes instead of hours.
Yeah, exactly. Okay,
because
and then for LBJ, they wanted to make sure that the White House was making it, so that way they would finally say it. But if it had been a Twitter account, I got a picture, flip or
you can pictures and do video, which also makes it increases the level of trust. But there are plenty of pictures that have been edited, plenty of video that have been, you snip the one part out of context, so you don't see the entire thing. That's what happened with the
it's kind of
high school kid not too long ago.
Oh yeah, I was thinking about the fairies. Remember, there was somebody who did a book of fairies, and they said they took pictures of fairies, and then they found out that they had just edited them all, and it was a time when it was harder to do.
Yeah.
But they'd spent time making these pictures of the fairies. Oh, look, it's really real because I can see it. And there was more believability because now we know about, the stuff y'all can do on the computer.
Since the exception of photography, like if you go through the photography history, they talk about, the initial people were learning how to bend reality with cameras because, you assume a picture's truthful because it has 1,000 words, right? A picture's worth 1,000 words. So, but they've been manipulating images since the very beginning
of time,
since the device was created,
right?
And now we have technology called deep fakes, where you can put someone else's face on someone else, as well as if you have enough their audio footage, you can make them say whatever you want.
Wow!
So we're entering an election now where you can make a candidate say whatever you want, and you have video and audio evidence to prove of that. So the world's going to get very crazy, and I think that's why Twitter is the future in some ways, because we have these organically developed trust networks, and so the people I follow, I put some trust in it, listen to what they say. Doesn't mean I immediately believe it, but I'm more likely to.
And
because
you followed them more. So
yeah, and if
it vetted them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I have a sense of who they are and what they normally say, and you have to take that with a grain of salt. And then if I feel like they're getting more and more dishonest or more provocateur or whatever, you can just unfollow and let them fade.
The whole thing for me with that is just I still can't believe, whatever, who knows. I just can't believe that Trump that they had video and they had audio of him saying really terrible things about women in general, about women, and that he kind of he walked through that unscathed, nobody he's a guy, or boys will be boys, or I don't understand how women themselves could vote for somebody who could speak that way about them, except for I guess they didn't like Hillary.
Yeah, I think that's probably the main thing, is the two choices were incredibly horrible. So
right,
who's the lesser of the two evils is always a question when you vote. So
right, so it's really hard.
Yeah, I think they're just both horrible candidates, and it played itself as it did.
Yeah, but you would have thought more people would have risen up, and just to have that debate be more.
Well, plenty of people have risen up, that's for sure. It's just there's still a huge percentage of the country. If you look at some of those electoral maps, it's pretty crazy how red it is.
Yeah, and I have to say it was very difficult for me too, because of my belief in that I really am. It's kind of a weird thing to say. I'm pro-choice, but I really believe that abortion is murder. So I would prefer, I would prefer that we as a society uplifted the dignity of the human person, and we had places to welcome every baby that was ever born, and that we had things in place to help people. But if you're a single mom and you find yourself pregnant and and you can barely scrape by, you might not even
Well, there's
feel
adoption.
Like you have no choices. Yeah.
I mean, there's also edge cases too, where it saves a life when you have an abortion sometimes. So it's a very complex issue, and unfortunately, a lot of the time it's talked about in very low resolution detail.
Yes, low resolution.
I've heard if you talk about third trimester, it's a very different conversation than first trimester, right?
Right.
The majority shifts. So, and then, second trimester, I guess is closer to the third from what I've heard, but, stats are damn lies or whatever. There's lies, damn lies, and stats or something like that. I forgot what Disraeli said.
Yeah, because it's very difficult. Yeah, when you're looking at these issues, they're not black and white, and they're not easily. They really require a lot more. And it'd be just nice because as a community, we do, unfortunately, don't have things in place to help people who could use help, and we're not welcoming for everyone. We don't have that. What is it? I would say they'll know we're Christians by our love, and we're not showing it very much right now.
Well, we're also trying to rub Christianity out from our culture too, to a large extent. When you're not a Christian and you feel that the Pledge of Allegiance is mentioning this Christianity thing, and your coaches out, at school are mentioning it. It's just everywhere and pervasive. You can feel very insecure about it and very attacked, and there's like this line that feels like it's been crossed, and you can build up resentment. It takes. Not everyone's ready for that, and it's tough because.
But the Pledge of Allegiance doesn't mention Jesus. It's just one nation under God. It just mentions
to them. What's the difference between God and Jesus? It's the same thing.
It's not. It's really not, because God just is the being. So you could be a Hindu, or you could be Jewish and not believe that Christ.
But if you don't believe there is a God, right? The definition of atheism, then right, then you are excluding a group.
Yeah.
So how do you come up with a world that's inclusive of these people that don't believe in God?
Peterson would say that even an atheist believes in.
Or acts as if they believe in
acts as if they believe in something as God, whether
or it's Christian principles. Their actions.
Oh, Christian principles. Well, I was going to say even because they adore different things. It's just that they're going to stand sleep overnight to see some speaker or some rock concert or something. They're going to have some passion. Kind of like he talked about Star Wars or something like that. There's going to be you're going to act as if.
Your life has meaning.
Whatever your God is. You still have something that in your life that's
meaningful,
that's meaningful,
and
that's
attracts you. Yeah.
Right. So how you act is going to be more important, really, than what you say you believe.
Because what do we know? What do we believe? It's all in our actions and how we actually carry ourselves out.
Yeah.
And we have these random thoughts in our head all day, every day. So we don't always know where they come from.
Yeah, he talked about something that I really liked, because he said that plurality of being. He talked about that man was created in the image of God, and that was an incredibly, almost an unbelievable idea. Like, he feels like that idea alone was something that you can't really believe and understand how advanced it is. That we're taking and claiming part of our own divinity and the plurality of being of God, which could be, he kind of dismissed it as it could be the different gods. I, of course, would be like Father, Son, Holy Spirit, because I come from the Catholic bent, so like R has that meaning. But also that language, that we're in the image and likeness of God. It is really kind of like, wow, amazing that we would see the divine within another person and within ourselves.
Well, and also know that we can be the destroyer too.
Right, we're full of snakes also, right? The battle of good and evil is inside of our hearts.
But yeah, it's incredibly cool that we can present ourselves as the creator, or see ourselves that we can actually create things, and we can seek to improve things.
Yeah.
We can live a better life, as well as we can live a worse one. And just knowing that, it's kind of scary, because knowing that you can fail, you don't want to fail.
Well, like I always tell my kids, it doesn't matter how many times you fall down, it's as long as you get up one more time than you fell down, right? Because sometimes if you're too afraid to fail, you won't even attempt to live. You won't even try things, Because let's face it, he talks about this in one of the books or something I've read, where you get mastery in something, and then you really have to start going towards something that you don't have mastery in. So you have one foot in the unknown and where you're like not doing good, but you have something that you're good at here, mastery, and one foot in unmastery, and that's the right way to be, where you're always kind of like going forward and changing and exploring different things. And he talks about that too, like maybe you're like, because he talked about it economically or something. I remember where he was saying like, so maybe you're not the best at being a plumber, but you're good at being a lawyer, or maybe you're good at being a driver. He was saying like the economy of our world has many different ways that you can succeed and many different ways that you can fail. So you can be a failure in certain things, and that's okay, because you can be a success in something else, and you can focus your attention on what's gonna make.
Yeah, I know he talks about DNA, how we have all this dormant skills that we just got to activate. I haven't really, but I do know.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I don't think he's really. I can't remember talking about challenge, but I know challenge is important. We all want to be challenged at our job, so it's not boring and it's adventurous, and you don't, that chance you're gonna fail. It's like the real way to live life is to do something that scares you every day. So like, you got to have a little bit of chaos to have adventure. Otherwise, it gets too boring, too predictable, and it's like, if you live the same day you did yesterday, it's like your brain's not going to even remember it.
Right.
It's just discarded information. It's like a lost day of your life.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so true. So you have to kind of look at what's going to have you be fully alive. And that's,
And there's a lot of place where you spend your day off watching Netflix, and the next day you're like, what did I do? I didn't progress anything. I mean, it felt good. Sometimes you need that day, but too many days in a row, you're just like
of doing that. You
can get in that downward spiral where you just forget how to build those motivation up, and you really gotta break things into baby steps so you can start building that momentum to get things started. And
he talks about that too in the book. Like, you waste a lot of time doing things that you didn't even care that you did. And sometimes they're done to just ignore or to procrastinate from doing something that you're uncomfortable tackling. So it's interesting. I have something here that says that the priestly part of us, that we realize that we're made in the image and likeness of God, and then the power of powers is constant across sources of power. I really don't know what I meant by that.
Yeah, I don't remember that part either.
So he talked about consciousness and sovereignty and dominion that man has over creation. So, that when we are aware that we're created in the image and likeness of God, we become conscious that God has given us part of himself, because he gives us, man, dominion and sovereignty over creation. I guess that's what I think I mean by this. But it's very complicated to figure this out. And I think that...
Yeah, even though I don't fully understand some of these relationships or terms, it's like at least he provides a high-resolution tool for those that can kind of see his understanding, and then that way you can kind of pick it apart more clearly. But sometimes you need to know how these entities relate to have these deep, meaningful conversations.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's really true. And because he's like, so if you want to take the story seriously, you have to look at that it's not male or female, but God in humanity,
Yeah, God's not a woman or a man, so to speak, under his understanding as he presented it.
Yeah, God is both and. Yeah, not this or, but both. Yeah, and even maybe more, huh? So I'm just looking here. And then we talked a little bit about the Masons, because I know that I didn't understand what that was about the Masons, and that's like a whole thing that came kind of contemporaneously. We talked about the USC scandal, and there was some vintner in St. Helena that bought Prisoner, that used to be the Franciscan winery, and then also some other place, and they painted it black and they made it kind of evil. And it was like kind of interesting to see how it went from, I think that was Arthur was talking about this, I'm not sure. But don't underestimate evil and where it comes from. And the internal judge makes us uncomfortable.
Yeah, I have us versus them, love thy enemy. That's one of the, I don't forget if he was saying that was one of the major differences between the Testaments or just Christianity in itself.
Right.
Was that we're supposed to handle our enemies by loving them, which is, incredibly difficult.
Yeah, very, very difficult. So what did it mean by here? Was this, I think this was Peterson hovers reductionistic. He hovers nearly being reductionistic. I'm not sure.
Well, I think if you don't have a high resolution understanding, if you're trying to use low resolution, you've reduced it down, and usually, you're dealing with only one aspect or ignoring certain parts of the whole equation, and that's usually how he uses reductionist.
Oh, so do you think he does that?
Well, of course, by definition, I mean, he's not.
How are you going to talk about this? Yeah.
I mean, he's only got a certain level of understanding, so he can only deal with that. So in a way, we're all reductionistic. But if someone's talking below the level you're on, you can try to elevate them and educate them, hopefully.
Right.
But I think it's just maybe a term to say stupid people, something along those lines. People that don't care, or people that simplify things because they either don't know or don't want to put the time in to know.
Oh yeah, or they might just be too busy trying to keep a roof over their head.
Or just have a set of worldviews that they don't want to change. You have certain values, and the world has certain meaning to you, and if you change that belief, it would throw your world into chaos.
Yeah. I have such a different idea right now because I think I was so blessed. I didn't realize. I never thought of myself as being really rich when I was young. My parents were very working class. But what an amazing thing to be able to have 4 years of college, to think about ideas, to talk about things, to read, to discuss. And it really, you have to have money to do that. I mean, like right now, because I've got 2 kids in college, I feel like I just get up, I go to work, I go to sleep, I get up, I go to work. And I really talk about feeling like a slave, you know?
Slave, yeah,
I'm a slave to pay my mortgage. I'm a slave to, help with the kids. It's kind of like all of these wonderful, amazing, and fantastic responsibilities that I love and cherish and really am happy for. But it means that I have to figure out a way to take care of it and to do it.
And there's the hope that it's short term, right? The 4 years of college, and they're going to be done, right? And then you have that light at the end of the tunnel.
Right at the end of the tunnel. No, that's very real. Yeah, but
it's much harder if you realize you're going to have to do it for the rest of your time.
Yes, and so I have a lot more. And also I have kind of a nice bed to kind of go and dream about, because I remember when I had time. I remember when I did have the leisure or the money to be able to do things. So suddenly, like, I really see where money is not as important as time, and yet you still have to have enough to keep the roof over your head, and you have to have enough to be able to buy food and to get gas in the car and drive to work so you can keep the roof over your head and all these things, and it's a tricky thing to be.
Well, and I think it's quite important, though it's been a thing for the last, I don't know, maybe 40 years or so, that like you have to do something you love, right? The career you choose, you got to have a challenge in it so you can find some difficulty and develop your skills, but it has to be interesting and adventurous.
Because even if you love it, work is work.
Oh, yeah.
Work becomes work.
There's a reason they pay you, otherwise you'd be a volunteer, right?
Right.
Because you wouldn't be doing it on your own, maybe.
Right, or you need money. But even if you love it, I think that, because I think when I owned my own business and I was doing stuff and it was for me, but still, you still have to get up and do it. There's a discipline. There's and there's a hierarchy here too. I'm just thinking about some people that maybe they've worked and they haven't had the ability to have that leisure. So there's certain things that if you haven't had the opportunity to think about, you don't learn how to think that way. Like, why are we even talking about this? I'm just trying to.
Well, it's like Maslow or Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yes.
Right? Like, you only get self-actualization if you take care of everything below it. So everyone's in a different place.
Yeah. Like who cares if this thing is organic if I can't even put food on my table? Then
exactly. Let's get food on the table first. Then we can worry about improving.
If it means that we have to use pesticides so that way people can eat, or people are going to be starving, or they can't afford, or they have to work a third job just so they can be able to do it, then you don't care. You only care about, and we're so wealthy in the United States, but you only care about that level when you have certain your basic needs already taken care of, and then you can kind of explore these other things. So it is kind of like, kind of interesting to see. I don't know why do I have the sun. I have the sun, and I think I was thinking the sun and the sun. I think is SON and SUN.
Well, the moon is supposed to be, was it the sun was the father and the moon was the mother, kind of?
Oh.
I remember him showing one of the illustrations. It was of a painting by Michelangelo or something along those lines.
Uh-huh.
And he talked about that a little bit.
And why was the moon the mother?
I forget.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting.
Watch the Biblical Series Part 2 and you'll find out all about it.
Yeah, go see it again. Yeah, okay. That's cool. So the divinity that's in humanity, and I'm looking here. And then I have another note here that resentment and judgment. I don't know what I was talking about.
Yeah, all I have is when you stop seeking understanding, that's when they become your enemy, or something along those lines. Or when you stop seeking, that's when you have someone that's no longer looking to improve things.
Right.
Or where we get tribalism, maybe.
Uh-huh.
That was one of my last notes.
Yeah, I can see that happening. And
Right.
I had monogamy, I guess, because we got into monogamy being the best way forward, even though the nuclear family is a disaster.
Yeah, so there was some argument with the definition of nuclear family was, but yeah, I remember Peterson talks about enforced monogamy, but there was some debate whether that's really best even in a matriarchal society, because maybe that's not the default state of nature. So.
Mm-hmm. And then I still have that, like, the will to destroy things. That's what metaphysical evil is. And I'm not sure if I even that malevolence, the practice of malevolence. So observable evil is then the interior will to want to destroy. That's what, and then I do have love your enemy, and then there's like a big question mark, like how do you even do that? How, and that's an unbelievable complicated idea, and so like how did we get that idea? Because that's like so that seems to go in the face of what it means to even be human, so you have to look at the snakes inside of you that wants to kill the enemy.
Yeah, that links to the resentment, which I just had. The answer isn't to toughen up, and I don't remember if that was something Peterson said, but that's one of my notes. We as human beings we deal with resentment, and kind of Peterson's message is that the way we treat tragedies and these wrongs that happen to us, the choices we make, good or evil, can improve the situation. And so resentment's a very big opportunity to improve the world or do good versus evil there. And I think that's...
So the resentment motivates you to act?
Well, definitely, right?
So then you have to choose how, right?
Vengeance or, you try to seek love, and that's the last thing you want to give them. So it's interesting because it's kind of like, batting your survival instincts.
Right.
But if you can do that, if you can delay your emotion and control yourself, you can have a better outcome, not only for yourself, but everyone around you. Because if you prove everyone around you, including your enemies, well, that's another thing interesting that Peterson talks about is, like, how do you get someone that has a problem to understand they need to fix their problem, or how you can help them if they just listen to you and they won't listen to you? How do you get someone that has a problem that doesn't want help, right?
Right. And that's like, what is love? And that's like, so what would love be? Because some people say, like, well, if you do everything for your kid, because out of love, then you've smothered them, and then they have no sense of having an awareness that they can fail and still stand back up. They feel like unempowered rather than empowered. So sometimes love means letting people fail, letting people go through things. It's a tougher love.
But if someone doesn't see the problem they're having, right, they won't admit to that, or they don't want to accept your help,
them,
right? So they were asked Peterson, so what should I do? And he's like, well, you can't help people that can't. All you can do is lead by example. Live a life that, that you can be the change you want to see, right?
Yeah.
And if you can lead by example, that's your only other way to get the people that don't see the problem. Eventually, when they do hit rock bottom and they see how why doesn't she have the problem with this or he have the problem, and they look to you as an example. And if they're smart, they'll use the hero archetype and model themselves and try to follow those behaviors. And hopefully learn from that. And it's not an easy path to be a hero. I mean, he's got to fight dragons, fire-breathing dragons that look like snakes. And
right, yeah. Interesting, yeah. And you can't do it to be the hero either, because if you do it to be the hero, you've lost the whole idea of what it is. I mean, you're doing it for the betterment of yourself, and that will hopefully improve everybody in your world.
Well, there's plenty that do just do it selfishly, and they're very competent and succeed, but there's a point, I think, where if they don't stop to help others, others won't be there to help them when they need it.
Right.
There's no one that's so competent they never need help.
Right.
And I think that's the important thing to remember, is that if you want to improve your life, you still have to live around others. We're very social creatures. So it behooves us to improve the lives of those that are around us. I mean, how can you say that, you know, having all taking advantage of all your friends, what are you going to be left with? A bunch of losers, right? They're all losers because you didn't help them.
Or you didn't cultivate the proper
It's very lonely, and that hurts our life somehow, right? Because we are social creatures. We need meaning, and I think that's somehow related to others, and we need others' perception. Like we have our own blind spots, and I need you to see my blind spots, because if I have the problem and I can't figure out why I keep running into it, it's because I'm blind there, and I need someone to help explain what's really going on, so I can maybe pay attention to the other signs that can help me sense that.
So if you really love someone, I think that a lot of times you're willing to risk their wrath or risk their being upset with you to tell them something that you perceive that's true about them, that's painful for them to hear.
Oh yeah,
or hurtful for them to hear.
In the latest March 2019, he talks. So how do I tell my my spouse or my significant other in my relationship that how do we have conversations that I'm unhappy about something? And Peterson says it's gonna be uncomfortable. That's just natural. But as long as you're both seeking the same goal, as long as you're aligned and aiming for the same thing, you'll want to work through it.
Right.
It's the person.
It's when you don't want to.
Yeah.
Then you have the real problem.
It's.
Yeah, I think that you and I talked about that at the very end at the door, because I was saying that was the thing I came to realize, that the opposite of love is not hate, because love and hate, you still care about the person. The opposite of love is just apathy, like you don't care anymore, because there isn't anything there to work with. But if you still have strong emotions about the person, you're still linked with them or tied to them in some way. But if you really I'm done, I don't care anymore, then that's really what the opposite of love is, and it's not it's such a interesting thing, because I think our society doesn't really look at it that way. They actually look at neutrality, or you do your own thing, that's fine, I'm not going to say anything, I'll let you go do, because I love you. But really, that's just, I'm a narcissist and I don't give a shit.
Well, yeah, you're not saying what you. Well, you're it's a lie, right? You're procrastinating. You don't want to deal with the situation right now.
Deal with you.
It's not worth it. It's not worth my time.
You're not
I've
worth
made
it
my
to
decision.
Me. Go ahead.
You do whatever you want, right? It's apathy,
right?
Or delaying the problem, because eventually that problem you're going to have to deal with, and it's going to take an uncomfortable situation to make it much more uncomfortable, right?
It's like, or if I decide I don't really care enough, so I'm not going to ever deal with it, because you can just go ahead and go to hell.
Yeah, or you get passive aggressive about it. Like, I should have told him, I was upset about that, I'm not going to say anything. And then later it happens, and you're so mad, and the other person doesn't understand. I just closed the bathroom door. I always do this. Why are you so mad this time?
Yeah.
It comes out.
What do you mean? Because I left the lid off the toothpaste? What? This is about that? Wow, you're now you're going to divorce me because I did that? What?
The straw that broke the camel's back. It's
right, because there was no integrity, there was no honesty. It had already died. It was withering all along. And then you didn't try to continue to nurture it by having these tough conversations.
Yeah, so it's by not procrastinating and not putting it off, you're gonna have to put some more work in now. It's gonna be hurtful, but it's like the proper way to raise children he talks about. It's like any parent knows that you can't make a world that's safe for your children. You have to make it tough for them.
Right.
It's just otherwise you have Sleeping Beauty, right? You're protected. She's so protected from all these evil elements that when she's 16, even though they try, the snake gets in the walled garden, and sure enough, she pricks her finger on the spinning wheel they had banished.
Because she's never seen one, so now she wants to go where if she's played with them all her life, she was like, oh, big deal, another one. But it's like, oh, I gotta go check it out.
Yeah, so you have to prepare your children, and the way you prepare your children is by challenging them and setting boundaries.
And by challenging ourselves too, right?
Oh, it's not easy to discipline or challenge. It's a lot of work.
Well, it's hard for me to discipline myself, frankly.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
right?
It's really hard. Like I love what he talks about that. Like I tell myself I'm gonna get up and do X, Y, Z, and I'm like, yeah, I don't really want to do that.
That's all rule 2. It's like you gotta take care of yourself like you're someone you're responsible for. It's like we all take care of our pets, but no one takes care of
us. Yeah, or making sure that we're good. And how do you practice that? Which is really interesting, And it is like, it is very interesting that his, that we found out that he got such a bad, that the School of Divinity doesn't want him anymore. So he's getting all this bad rap, like somehow he's responsible for his ideology, is somehow responsible for what the shooting at the Muslim, is that what it was?
Yeah, New Zealand. They've pulled his book in New Zealand because they felt that his recent appearance was linked to triggering the shooter, and if you're opponent of his, you could usually make that claim, but correlation is not causation, as any true scientist knows. But that's the thing, is that the people in power like to take advantage of the people that don't know science. So.
Yeah, but so there's so much fear around Peterson. I don't really quite understand why. Because he's so polarizing, and I don't even understand.
Well, he brings really strong arguments from the past back. So just when you thought you broke free of change, we can do whatever we want now. Right? He's definitely, you have to address his arguments, and then if you don't want to address his argument, well, just call him a racist. Call him a sexist, call him, was it anti-trans? I forget the term. Because it's much easier to, ad hominem than it is to actually address his issues, because his issues are very hard to parse in the first place. You really have to put the time in to learn his language and speak it. It's almost like its own
even
subculture.
to look at us, we're just going very slowly through the videos.
And we don't always get the same page. So if you watch him debate with Sam Harris, they have 2 different dictionaries.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So if you were going to wrap up what we did, what would you, do you have a synopsis?
No.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, it was interesting week. It's always fun to go over his work. There's always something new we pull out of it, even if it's the same material.
Oh yeah, that's really true.
And even revisiting it twice a week, we did it once in the group, and now here live, we talked about different things and came to different conclusions. Maybe not different conclusions, but at least different topics. Yeah,
different. Looking at the same thing, but we're like the elephant. We're holding the tail, and maybe before we're talking about the trunk.
Yeah,
it's the same piece of information, but we're looking at it.
Yeah, because
focusing on different ways.
The discussion takes us to different places. So.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
Especially because we can talk with the knowledge we gained from the previous meeting too. So that's always helpful.
Yeah. That is really helpful.
Yeah, last time we talked about it last night is needs God's help, grace. We need grace.
Oh yeah, I did have a bunch about grace too, right? That we can't do it on our own, that we require the divinity that's in humanity kind of requires contact with that very divinity.
Yeah, and
we can't do it on our own. That's we rely on a power outside of ourselves that helps us to do.
And I think grace is like a skill too. I think it's something you have to
practice.
Learn to see, and then learn how to be graceful.
Just like hitting a tennis ball, right? Your aim's going to be off sometimes, and you're going to scrape the ground, or you're going to throw your arm out. So you have to practice utilizing grace.
And you got to understand it first. Yes, seeking it.
Yeah, and wanting to not get in the way of it, I say. So there's something from the Course in Miracles was what is the ego is easing God out, right? So that's always whenever you're trying to say, oh, I don't need God, that you're easing God out of the picture because you want to be the main one in. Are we on time?
Yeah, we're good.
Oh, we're good, yeah. So that always reminds me that to let grace come in the picture means that I'm going to open myself to God's grace and allow it to live in me. And I always think of the the Our Father, because the Our Father says, forgive us our sins as, so there's that, as we forgive those who trespass against us. So you can't ask God to forgive you, or the snakes that are inside of you and the evil that you've done, unless you are practicing forgiving. And I always remember this wonderful spiritual director I had who told me, he gave me this challenge to forgive some stuff that my then estranged husband had done, and I really couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I was like, I can't really. He was like, can you really pray the Our Father? Meditate on each of the words and what you're saying. I was like, oh no, I can't. And he goes, oh, that's perfect. That's really good. Now ask God to help you do it. And if you can let go, then a lot of the anger, or a lot of the things, you're actually laying it. And for me, the foot of the cross, I'm laying it and giving it to God to then change me, So you do get grace as something metaphysical that's outside of my understanding, but outside of me, that then comes and helps me to be a better person, to act in a way that, no, I don't even really want to. No, I don't want to forgive.
They've shown that, when we get on our knees, the position itself puts us in a certain mindset, just like when we have our shoulders
stand up straight with
your shoulders back, right?
Right.
You communicate something, but it also changes how you think and feel and operate.
How you feel, yeah.
But when you're on your knees, you're surrendering, right? You're more susceptible. Right. And I know that, when you say a prayer or whatever, no one might be ever hearing it, but it helps you. Yeah, exactly. There's like the placebo effect. I don't know if it's the same thing, but there's these things we can do that change the outcomes, and we don't know why or how, but it happens. So there's all these
interesting too, because
motions.
you become more humble. So you're humbled, because there will always be people who are better at you than some things, and maybe things that you're better at than other people. So by getting on your knees, you kind of have a position of humility. So you own some humility that might not be there, so that you can see the snakes inside of you are not that much different than the snakes that are inside your enemy. So the way that this person hurt you, that you're having such a hard time forgiving, is because they knew they were going to hurt you.
And you knew they knew that.
Yeah, they were intending on hurting you.
They're out to get me. I know it.
Because who can hurt you? Really, somebody who knows you. Those are the people that can hurt you the best. They know that whatever XYZ is going to annoy you, and then they do that, or then they know what's the right words that are going to really be kind of crushing to you. So that intimacy, does make you very vulnerable as well.
That's why it's a risk, right?
Right.
But it's also, very reassuring and has meaning when you can build that bond, the deepest level of conversation and connection, right?
Yeah, so cool. Yeah. So loving your enemy is also loving the evil or the snakes that are within you, and hopefully keeping them. I don't want to say. Because you want to have them. You need them, actually. You need to have the snakes in some ways to deal with some of the things in the world.
It's interesting. When an event happens, you have your choice to react. Now, there are some events, our instinct kicks in, and we have emotion. It's like, sometimes it's a snake, and we need to jump out of the way and just let it. There's a lot of survival things there. But
sometimes we have to crush his head.
Yeah.
It's right there in front of us, so we got to
There's reasons we have these instincts and emotions, but at the same time, it's like, a lot of his message I've seen is, and a lot of society, right, is if we can delay the emotion and wait it out till we actually can process it logically or calm down, we can work on a better outcome. Or if we're familiar with the pattern, then we know the emotion's coming and we can handle a deal, and we know the answer because we've thought about it beforehand before we're in the situation. But the other thing is like you can't just not process the emotion. You can't just ignore the emotion. That's where you get the passive aggressive. So you have to acknowledge emotion. You got to learn healthy ways to acknowledge that emotion. And that's why knowing these patterns and knowing how to deal with these situations, slowing your roll so you don't have an immediate reaction, get it under your control as best as possible. And with these processes, hopefully, that that Peterson and maybe Christianity is trying to preach to show us, these are the ways to play the game and for the best possible outcome of all games.
And then you have a better conscious awareness of where you're acting from. So, because you've seen people who, maybe even a loved one dies or something, and they're so caught up in their emotion, they're completely irrational, they're crazy, and you can't really calm down. So they have no, I hate to say it like this, but they don't, they're being ridden off on their emotions. They don't have control. They're not actually they're not driving the train anymore. They're like gone. And I think that happens to people who don't want to have responsibility. So like the more that you're able to practice having responsibility, then the easier it is for you. When something does occur, you can have that like flare up internally, but then you practice being responsible enough that you can kind of, okay, let me take a beat here. I can, take care of this. And sometimes I think of that like, that's so important because, wow, sometimes we get people who just get so emotional, even like temp workers and stuff, where they like can't put it in the box. Like, wait, this is only, you only got like a 6-hour shift. Okay, so somebody's annoying you. Oh, well, I can do anything for the 6 hours. I can ignore the person. I can figure out a way to work. But then you see these tempers fly or whatever,
Yeah, we don't know if they're on their worst day or whatever else is going on in their lives. And, like, everyone's in a different place. There are some people in better places, some people in worse places.
Yeah.
It's really on us. And that's another thing about responsibility. None of us are truly responsible for everything and everyone. I mean, we are kind of, but at the same time, it's like we choose what responsibilities we take on.
Yeah. And we choose to either diffuse a situation or throw some gasoline on it. You know what I mean? Like sometimes something can happen because we made an error or whatever. We didn't think this person was going to have this reaction. But then it's on us as to whether we're going to like stoke it up or we're going to like be humble enough or like, like say, oh, wow, I didn't mean it that way. Or you're going to go, like, oh, yeah, let's dig it out. Right. So it sounds like your Instagram thing, too. Like people can kind of like.
Vent.
Yeah, right.
I think that's really good. I think we're still teenagers and learning how to use this tool, so to speak. We're still figuring it out. But I think...
you say teenagers. Well, that's pretty advanced.
Yeah, the internet's, what, 20 years around? Not everyone's been on the internet for 20 years, so I'm rounding down a little bit. But I think as we learn to use this tool, it'll be a great way to vent.
I still say middle school, maybe.
I'm not saying go on the internet and, pick on people, but at least you can vent your concerns, and someone might have some advice for you, or... help you see that blind spot you're saying, or ask you a question you haven't thought of. There's a lot of things. And responsibility's got a really interesting relationship with freedoms, too. It's like, if you want freedom from responsibility, then that's slavery, right? But some people want that. But
that's really true, right? Freedom from responsibility, that means that you're a slave, and you might be okay with that because you don't have to make all the tough choices. And somebody's giving you food, you can grumble about the food, but it's like...
And there's people that want that. They don't want to do... That
like the Jews who are like, they wanted to go back to Egypt, manna again? What's the deal?
And the other thing is interesting is like to create a right, it becomes everyone's responsibility. So every right you add to, like if you want the right to healthcare, that becomes everyone's responsibility too. So there's really interesting relationships about responsibility, slavery, and people.
Yeah, and this is off topic a little bit, but it's Jordan Peterson because he was saying something that so there's socialized medicine in Canada, right? Because this is the Queen's England, and so they still have socialized medicine. And I was trying to understand, like, because I know that like, ooh, socialized stuff, that's really bad. But there's a lot of things he doesn't seem like he's saying that. So I get very confused. So is he a socialist? I don't think he is.
No, I think he would say he's not if he had to answer that.
Yeah, but I don't know that he is so black and white. Like there's not boxes. Well, like people want to put everything into like a box, and
especially
then that's
political, because that's what all the media covers, and that's how you get votes. Right? There's a lot of money in political ideologies, and I think that's one of the reasons he avoids it, because he really doesn't want his message to be political. He wants to say, "Hey, look, underneath all these issues, there's the substructure of existence that we're actually dealing with and interacting with.
Right.
There's all these concepts we've had for tens of thousands of years that are really driving all the things above it. So why don't we focus on the real problem, the root cause, instead of yelling at each other?"
Yeah, because like he says something. I remember hearing something on I think it's from the book. He says like, "Hey, so socialists, they're capitalists too. They just believe other people should have the money. So they want to spread the money out, but they still really focus on the money. So the capitalists are focused on the money." And he was saying like, so you have to figure out, can you derive a different system? Because just because capitalism means, it's something he was saying today that I thought, wow, this is very like a shocking idea to me. But just because through capitalism, oh no, I was taking my walks. That meant I was listening to a lecture. Sorry.
Same person, yeah.
Yeah, so same person, different thing.
Oh.
He's like, just because you're going through a a capitalist society, which means that certain people who are better at handling money are going to have more money. And there will be certain people that don't have money. There's an inequity, you know?
Yes.
And so
all hierarchies kind of develop, right? There's going to be people at the bottom of hierarchy way more at the bottom than there are at the top. It's just the nature of things is his argument.
Right, yeah, because the top, you know, it's just like over and over. Like there's only 5 musical composers or something that's written all the classical pieces that we all listen to. And so like, and some people were like so prolific that we can't even explore all of that they've written. And so, yeah, he says this and it happens over and over again in different cultures too. Like prolific writers are, certain people are just, they're the ones who do the most of it. Some of the people are really good at making money, they make the money. And certain people are not as good at handling money or making money or have...
He says that the hierarchies that tend to last seem to be the hierarchies based on competence. So to mess with competence hierarchies, do it at your own peril, because there hasn't been anything that's shown to last as well as competence hierarchy. As soon as you mess with putting the competent people at the top, well, guess what? You're not going to get the best work out of everyone.
Yeah, and actually, that's exactly, I think I had to go in for my lunch, because I think that's where he was going, because he was saying that socialists are just as much capitalists. They just want to take and spread the money out in a different way.
Well,
they feel that if they do so, then everyone is then going to rise and have the same level of competency. And he says it's just not.
Well, they would like probably a much flatter structure, right? Or really, there's not many levels between the top and the bottom, so to speak. If no levels at all, it'd be ideal if we ruled ourselves to a certain extent, and that would be nice. But I think what happens in the implementation is that you realize, well, we should have someone in charge of something, right? We need a republic, because true democracy is the lynch mob, right? No one wants a mob. Yeah. That's true democracy. So it has to be tempered with something. So eventually you do add some layers to your hierarchy, and then when you deal with a lot of issues that creep up in socialism, it's very easy to say, well, let the people in charge deal with that. And
because it's a shorthand, and it's because
it's deferring responsibility, right? I don't have an answer for that, so the people in charge can figure that out. It's very easy hand waving to a certain extent, and that's exactly what plays out. They put the people in charge, and guess what? The people in charge get corrupt. And I think America's design, they're like, how can we build a system assuming that everyone that's put in the hierarchy near the top is going to be corrupt? You know, how do we design a system that's defensive, that does the least amount of damage, just assuming all the people that are in the republic are going to become corrupt. So you can only
be in for 4 years, because at least then we can vote you out.
Well, we don't have that for senators, but we have the Supreme Court. They're in there for life. So it's very interesting where they put the checks and balances, and there's way more written about it than I'll ever know. But it's interesting to see these systems, and I think there are huge economic questions unanswered in socialist plans, as far as they've been explained to me. I may be completely wrong. And that's...
Yeah, and then like right now with Obamacare... I'm sorry, because now I'm getting into something that does... Because I'm not quite sure I understand. So do we have socialized healthcare now or not?
No, we do not.
We don't, right?
It'd be one payer would be the government pays for everything. Right now, it's kind of a hybrid.
Yeah, and it's not really working that good.
It's definitely gotten worse since it's been implemented. I think everyone would say that. But a lot of insurance companies have either gone under or merged with others. So we have these mega insurance companies, which an oligopoly does not benefit anyone. And
that's so true.
Yeah.
That's really true.
And
because at least in a free market,
yeah,
if we can have a free market, then there's like competition to keep it down. But if one person's or several entities are in control, then they can go ahead and do whatever they want and exploit how they want to. Yeah.
Yeah, we did have a meeting one time where we talked about this a lot. I'm not sure I believe that insurance should be acceptable in society. That's my current point, and I haven't had anyone be able to talk me out of that.
Oh, how do you mean?
I don't think... I think insurance should be banned.
Oh, interesting.
That would make everyone take
because it's kind of like a high-risk wager here, huh?
Well, I mean, if you look how it works, right, you're supposed to have people that pay in more that don't need it, and so that people that do need it can borrow from it. It gives them pull. So it's like a rubber band, right?
Yeah.
And the argument for why socialized medicine might be bad to implement right now is that we have too many demands and not enough people providing in. And that was one of the things Obamacare did, was try to force everyone into it so we have more elasticity. But even though we spend more on healthcare now than we do the military, we're the
Wow.
world's largest insurance company before we are, a country with borders, so to speak, that we defend.
Uh-huh.
And that's with Medicare only paying 25%. So bringing it up to 100%.
Yeah.
Would have maybe devastating consequences on our economy, because the only way to deal with that maybe is to print more money, and then our inflation
so how do
drops to
these
the
other
floor.
places do it? Like, how does, like, in England where it's free healthcare, or even like France, it's
Well,
the healthcare is.
some of the ideas is that, well, if you had everyone on the same
because doctors
system,
don't get paid as much. Is that what? Because we.
no, doctors aren't getting paid now under our system, so it's not.
Yeah, so that's not it.
But in their system, they believe they can cut costs because they can put preventative care, because they know that anything we do to make you healthier is going to save us money in the long run, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's another problem too with this is that
I don't know,
as
but
soon
then
as
you got the big farm.
as soon
they
as
want you to get sick, because then they make money selling you
yeah,
pills.
well, and the other problem too is that as soon as you give the responsibility of the government to taking care of your health, guess who's in charge of making decisions about your health?
The government, yeah.
Well, and your freedoms.
Right.
So you give up that at your own peril. It affects your freedom as well.
Yeah, but the problem is that, let's say that if you have no insurance, and then you have no way to pay, then they can deny you admittance into hospitals.
Well, no emergency rooms are going to turn everything away. They even take illegals. I mean, that's just the way hospitals work. But what the argument is...
Do they really?
Yeah.
Okay, so because there was a time when they would turn you away, so they can't legally.
I don't think anyone gets turned away these days.
Oh,
and
interesting.
Yeah.
Because there was a time that I had a friend, and he went to the hospital, and they refused admittance to him. He had to go to a county. He had to go to a county hospital.
Well,
he had to go. Yeah.
There's always some place usually. Yeah.
That can take you, but the quality of care. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you can't show that you have financial means to take care of it, then they're like, oh, sorry, we don't have to serve you. But maybe that has changed due to laws and.
Well, and you got to look at the resources available too. A lot of the NHS versus the UK's things, they're really good on some things, and other things, especially the specialists, they're either sometimes so high demand that your cancer survival rate is only 6 months, but the doctor can see you in a year.
Yeah,
so you're not even going to get in for your first visit, and that's why a lot of them fly over to the States and get it taken care of, because they have the money and they don't have the time.
So if you have the money, right, yeah. That's why I think, if you have the money, then you don't really need insurance.
And I've heard good stories, I've heard bad stories, so it's another anecdotal thing, what you believe and how the question is, like I said, the limited resources, do we have enough of them? And right now, my understanding is that a lot of doctors are leaving the system because of the new regulations. I mean, the Obamacare bill, or ACA, is 50,000 pages, and they've only added to it since it's been passed. So, what human being can say they've read 50,000 pages and honestly say they understand it?
Yeah.
There's only a handful of people that have the economics background, the medical background, the law background to even wrap their head around it. So.
It's just too legalistic. It's all just red tape, huh?
Yeah, and then you have to understand it on a timeline too. It's like you might have a lifetime to study that thing.
Right. Yeah, you might need it.
Yes.
So
things are very complicated.
But then how would you get? So if you had no insurance, then how would you be able to be sure you could get services? Because then it really is the rich only. Right? So there's that, how many percent that he says of people who can't even serve in the military because their IQ is not enough. So there's a certain
what do we do about the disenfranchised? Absolutely. That's a big question.
What do you do about the people that aren't able?
Well, and I think that was the original idea for
You're right.
Medicare, right, was a safety net. But the problem is it keeps growing because you could always take care of more. And I think eventually our economy will hit a point where single payer will make sense and we can do it. I just don't think we're anywhere close to it at the moment.
Yeah. You think the economy will be that good that we'll be rich enough as a people, as a society, that we will say, okay, I'll just take responsibility for myself.
For the experts I've listened to on the understanding of economics, it's our GDP is growing. We're still in a growth phase. And as long as we don't overextend our spending, like, you know, max out our credit cards too far.
Right.
And that our growth can still that, and we have faith and belief that we can, that we're not in a downturn or recession.
Yeah.
We believe that we're going to continue to grow as a country because we're number one. That faith is the driver. As soon as we feel that
Isn't
we've
that
crossed the line. Yeah.
So
Well,
it's a belief in the good. It's like the word again. What do you believe? Where do you see it going? And that belief is really what drives the train.
Economics is very strongly tied to faith. We believe, we have faith that the paper in our back wallet or purse actually means something. That's an act of faith, because it is, after all, just paper.
Yeah.
And in the 70s, it used to be backed by gold in Fort Knox, and that's
You're
no
right.
longer the case.
Yeah, scary, huh?
So as long as we have the faith.
So it's not gold. So what is it based on? Since I'd like to.
As far as I understand, just what the government's
whatever
word.
they want to say.
So as long as everyone believes the government, we're okay, folks. And if you look on Twitter, that's starting to decay a lot, and you know, we have these corrupt hierarchies all over the place, and I think that's what Peterson's message is let's make sure we call on what we see, speak truthfully that these hierarchies have problems, and let's try to get them addressed before they cause irreparable harm.
Yeah, before they become malevolent.
Yeah.
And they really cause a lot of harm.
I think there's a lot.
But I'm very, because my daughter lived overseas, and I was really surprised because even though she was an American, they let her go have health care in France. It was not serious, but medical visits and stuff that would have cost hundreds of dollars here, maybe even $1,000 here. And it was all covered because they have, the social health care. So, I mean, I understand. So maybe it's good for small things like the common cold or for different things. But then when you get into like more serious things, then you don't have the.
It could be.
And it could also be like, I know that I personally like worry like, oh, like what about like if I have too many things wrong with me or I'm too old? Does that mean that, they're not going to waste their resources on someone who, is older because I have less of a life expectancy or I'm not as valuable.
Talked about death panels, right?
Right.
Government's going to decide whether you get care or not, and that's the truth of the matter. If they're paying, they get to make the decision. That's only right. That's only just.
Right. So they got to figure it out.
Yeah. So no matter how you slice it at a very high level, that process has got to happen somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess if you have enough resources, then you can spend more. And so hopefully you get to the point where you get rid of the death panels even.
Right.
If things can continue to grow, but it's a huge gamble, right? Are we going to be as good as we hope we are? That's why you got to aim upwards so we can actually hit upwards.
So we can go.
We don't want, the Chinese and the Russians meddling with our system to try to get things going the other ways by doing division.
But wouldn't the world, now that we're more of a global economy, I mean, wouldn't the whole world
that's
be
true,
raising up because hopefully if I'm raising up myself, you're coming on my coattails, or I'm grabbing onto your coattails.
Yeah, but how many people in a neighborhood do you know that get along with their neighbor?
Right.
It's easier said than done.
Well, we always get along with our neighbor when there's a war.
Well, or there's call to action. Or if there's a disaster, I mean, Napa, we've had earthquakes, we've had wildfires.
Oh my gosh, the fires, the floods. Suddenly, your neighbor that you couldn't stand, you're like, oh my gosh,
Oh yeah,
yeah, because you're in it
the
together.
Best in people usually,
yeah, it
right?
really does bring it out.
Who's helping others, and as Mr. Rogers said, always look for the helpers, right? They're always.
Right. Yeah, it's just a fascinating thing because I'm not quite sure I understand a lot of the people who are so anti-Peterson, and so maybe this is part of my understanding him more and why he's so polarizing and why, it just seems like what a lot of fear that you can't even entertain different ideas.
Well, I like the fact that he's engaging in debate and he's trying to stay open to communication and try to really talk about ideas and fight it out, because I think I don't think he believes that he knows everything, but
I love that about him. Yeah.
Yes, but he's going to try to seek the truth, and he's encouraging others, and there's certain aspects of that, seeking the truth, keeping an open mind, believing that the other person has that. There's some of these core values here that it's just gonna that a lot of people believe in and already know, and this material just helps us reinforce why that is. And help ourselves and we help others with it.
Right. I have a question, and this is off topic again, but did you do the self-authoring, or have you done any of it?
I bought it. I haven't done it.
Oh, you haven't done it yet? Yeah. So you bought it, and with the idea
there.
that you would, yeah. So have you got a chance to look it over? I was thinking about purchasing it myself, but I want to make sure when I do it, I give myself a timeline that I have to do it by.
He says 6 months. So you can take as long as you want. He says that's design. Yeah, he says if you do it less than 6 months, you're really hurting yourself. Something like along those lines.
Oh, so he wants you to kind of like take some time with it.
Yeah, there's the Understand Myself, which is like supposed to be a 10-minute quiz type thing, and you're not supposed to do it if you're depressed, and there's a couple other things.
You're not supposed to do what?
Do it when you're depressed, because that will skew the results.
Oh, it will skew it for you.
Right,
Oh,
if you're aiming downwards, guess what happens?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You realize, yeah, I'm looking down here, huh? Interesting. And the point of this is to the self-authoring is that you learn to, as you would tell a therapist, you write down your story and learn from it, like you would, like, because we're auditory processors, or we're, so you're writing it down, kind of thing.
Some of it, yes, we bring it right, but it's the divinity in us. We're create your future. Write your story. What do you want your story to be? What is your obituary? Work backwards, right? When you die, what are the things that you want to be said about you? So it's accessing that creative part of yourself of creating aims of what you could be and what you want. So it's really some introspection and deep thinking so that you can at least examine the future you might like to have, and just even knowing what you might like, your things you might be interested in. It's hard to put them on your fingers sometimes, but after you've gone, like I said, gone to written down, all of a sudden you know what you want. It's a little quicker to access, right? Oh, you know what? Maybe I will read that because I did want to learn that.
Yeah, I did want to do that.
Or maybe I'll take more chances because I know that's on my self-author. My story includes that, so I'm going to embrace that.
Oh, I want to have more leisure time and be able to travel. Oh, maybe I better look for a better paying job so that I can do that.
Exactly. As soon as you have the goals and you know who you are and where you are, you can determine how you get from point A to point B. The paths that make it all
will start to come up. Yeah.
And then when you are exposed with opportunities, you can go, hey, is what I said I want what I really want, or do I need to change where I want to change my aims and my directions? And you don't always end up where you start, but life's not about the destination; it's about the journey, right?
Right. I see. Oh, interesting. Okay, that's cool.
But
and it is to spend time within you to kind of like take the chaos and organize it a little bit more. Well, so you can see the paths, you can see the opportunities when they appear. Because you might be getting all kinds of opportunities, but you're blind to it because you're not.
Or you keep failing over and over again, and it's a set of tools.
I thought I was a great musician.
Yeah,
and
all this
everybody
time
goes like, "Oh, you're really, did you know you're tone deaf, and we don't really like how you sound."
Yeah, the idea is.
But I thought I was gonna be like Madonna.
It's like a psychoanalytical questions that therapists usually ask you, and the good therapists try to get you to answer your own questions. Like, you write it down and then you read what you wrote. Right, it's like you come back in another time.
What a bunch of bullshit that was.
Yeah, exactly. I remember when I was at that point, but you keep reading it over and you keep changing it and you update it. But that back and forth, you can really gain perspective on who you were. Be like, you know what? I wasn't really practicing as much as I'm practicing now. Maybe things are different, or I did notice that Sally's really doing this other thing. I should try that too. And it's you got that because you wrote how good Sally was, and now you're noticing, I mentioned Sally here. Maybe I should pay attention to what she's doing. What is she modeling? Is she a leader, or your hero? You pay more attention to her. A lot of Peterson's about seeking truth and being aware, and that's tough because we're blind and we don't necessarily have all our senses and sensitivity in our senses developed. So
and I like how you say that about that sensitivities, because I think a lot of times we're not even aware of how we're coming across. We don't even know ourselves very well, and so it kind of takes that time to have that introspection and to write it down and then go, oh yeah, no, I was lying about this. Oh, am I lying to myself about this? Maybe I am. Because we do lie to ourselves also. Like, oh, this is the best I can do. Well, maybe I can just do this one little thing better.
Well, and being truly sensitive isn't always the right mode of being either. There has to be some type of strategy that you develop over time with experience. Because being sensitive to everything is also horrible, because then you become intolerant.
Right.
So there is some type of, like I said, experience or wisdom you gain from each sense, and when you should pay attention to it, when you shouldn't. So that's another hard balancing act that you have to work into it. So it's not just seeking sensitivity and everything, but it's being able to be sensitive when you need to be sensitive.
Right. Yeah.
As Peterson says, empathy is not a virtue.
Yeah. I find it really fascinating to me as I'm reading through this book, because I do want to be known, I want to be seen. And then I think that there's so many ways that there's masks that I'm wearing when I'm talking to different people, you know? So in a lot of ways, I feel like there's more intimacy with you, my strange friend that I've only just met through this meetup group, because we're dealing with things that have consequence, that have matter, that have meaning, you know? And I think that a lot of times you get into friendships that are easy, but they're shallow, you know? And so you don't often have the ability to have friends who want to go deep into ideas with you or want to do that, you know?
Yeah, I embraced the internet pretty early, and so I was able to make friends online.
Oh, yeah, that's what you were saying.
And the interesting thing is, so I found these really good connections, these really good deep friends that we had these really deep connections with, and I think it has something to do with personality type, or you really have to have a level of operation. Like if you're following Peterson, you're already trying to aim to improve yourself, maybe, or there's some aspect of leadership or self-improvement or self-help or something along those lines you're already seeking. And so we already have some common hobbies, common goals, maybe even common personalities to a certain extent, even though we've kind of all said we're a little different Briggs-Myers, but
but the goal is to kind of understand things or to sort things out or have an interest in that.
And I know we've all kind of pointed to each other like, I really like how that person can see this or whatever. Yes. So we all have our different sensitivities and skills and knowledge of what we've read. We all bring something different to the table, and I think we all enjoy that, because I think another commonality is we all like to learn.
Right.
There's a lot of teachers in the group, or I'm a son of a teacher, so.
Right, so you have that. Yeah, so how did you find friends on the internet to, like, again, was it through, like, different things that you were interested in, and then you got deeper with them? I guess I haven't used that tool, so I'm interested to find out how that works.
You make a value assertion, and you see who agrees with you, right? You put yourself out there to be vulnerable. You watch who tears you apart, and sometimes the person tears you apart also becomes a good friend, because you fight it out and you realize you both love debate or something. I mean, you communicate just like you do in real life. You observe people. You see where the heroes are, who are the people you want to be. Like, there are certain people you might follow that you're a fan of. And,
so again, you have to risk.
Yeah, you have to risk. You have to say things, right? You're not going to make any friends without saying something. And then the things you have to say, you have to be in step with the culture, right? You can't be the very awkward or very annoying, right? You got to kind of watch the social norms of the environment you're in, and that takes some learning.
Yeah.
But after you're acceptable to that subculture, I think there's something about being attracted to people that you want to be or have skills. So there's always something in my friends I could definitely say I wish I had that.
Right. Well, yeah, so you admire something in them, and that so you want, or that you want to learn, and then you hope that they admire something in you.
And by friending and dedicating some time to them, I hope to pick that up when I spend time around with them. And hopefully it's reciprocal, right? They see something interesting or funny or entertaining, some type of value they get back.
Right, yeah. It's a real thing, though, because I kind of feel like I raised my two daughters, and we have certain values. And it's lonely because so many people don't want to swim on the deeper end of the pool. And I don't know if that's like a real thing, or I just haven't found the right area.
It's tough to walk this line, because I think I grew up in the 80s, and it's like stranger danger, right? We taught a generation that talking to strangers, and it's a very defensive position. It's like, it's correct. It's not necessarily wrong. There are people out there you want to avoid, but now you've built a society where it's I'm going to retreat my phone here and hide from the people around me. And, you know.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting because, you know, at the winery, so people are going on vacation, spending probably thousands of dollars to come to Napa. And you will see this happen where the husband and the wife, and then they both get on their phones. Well, they're not even present to one another.
They're sharing
or
it
present
with their
there.
communities, though. They are being very communicative. It's just not right there in front of them. They're bringing the rest of the world on the vacation with them. It's interesting too because it's hard not to write off. Before the 80s too, we had introverts and extroverts. So there are people that just are that way. They don't want to be extroverted. They're that don't want to maybe they need others to bring them out, and that's what the extroverted people do. So it's hard to blame it all on stranger danger to a certain extent because it's always been there. But you're saying
like it's like people are retreat into their own little.
Well, I think we're ending up with more introverts because we've created an environment where it's very easy to become introverted and stay introverted, where it's harder to leave your shell, so to speak. Or because it's easier to stay in your shell. So even though we've made it easier, it's actually harder now.
Yeah, no.
And so you can actually develop extroverted skills by talking online, but it's very different than in-person skills.
Yes.
And you're going to get really sensitive to the words themselves instead of how people say the words, body language, tone of voice. There's plenty of voice chat happening in video chat now, and I think that's why YouTubers and live streamers do much better when they put their face on camera.
Right.
Is people can read that and they get more connected.
Peterson. Like Peterson could really piss you off if you read this with a certain tone that you're hearing.
If you haven't seen the videos first.
Right.
Yeah.
But then you hear him or you hear him reading the book. Wow, that's like so cool to hear him read the book. Because sometimes I read through some chapter and then I was like, listen to it on tape and I was like, I got it totally different. I got it totally wrong.
Yeah.
Based on his intonation and how he's telling the same
we also
story.
was tactile, auditory, visual learners. We're different learners each way, so we have different things. So you're going to experience the book differently than you're going to experience the audio cassette. So
and then to see him, and then to see like what we've been watching in the biblical series, that's like amazing because you can see his face and you can see him really struggling with things and sorting things out, and he's not authoritative. He's not a dictator, like telling you to do this. He's saying, well, I'm coming along here, and based on this guy and this guy and this guy, this is what I think.
Yeah, it's an interesting balance.
Synthesizing
he's teaching to be open-minded, but he's got his mind made up about certain things. He's got these beliefs, but he's willing
to... And let me tell you what it is.
Well, he's like, these are my beliefs. Come challenge them. And I like that part.
I worked on this for years.
I've read a lot on this.
And now I'm going to tell you what it is. This is what it is. Yeah, he has that. I love that certitude though too, because that
confidence. Yeah, people are attracted to confidence.
I'm really attracted to that, and what I like about it is I don't believe that he's in stone. I believe that he has spent a lot of time and has formed him. But here's what I really believe it is. I really believe this. I might listen to you if you had some good things, but you're going to come up against me because I really have spent a lot of time doing this. This is not just, I believe it's this way.
Yeah, exactly. He can, connect one argument after the other to build it, so it's not like a sophist where it just jumps.
Right. Yeah, I'm not just pulling this out and then going to let it go.
Yeah, or I'm going to skip over a bunch of details.
Right. Yeah, it's very, very cool.
This
is true, though. I see what you mean, because in a lot of ways it's going to be self-selective. Like we're choosing to come together to talk about this. So the fact that we're even doing that means that we self-selected this group, so we're here.
Yeah, it's a bunch of people that are interested in reading this book, so there's going to be some commonalities.
Right.
But it's hard to measure because, correlation and causality. Correlation, correlation and causation. There we go.
Right, correlation and causation. Interesting, yeah. That's very fascinating that you point that out, though. It is true. It's just been interesting to me because I have come across certain friends who you just can't, you might want to go deeper and you can't really get there with them. And I'm not always sure why. And I think part of it is what he says. I make assumptions that everyone is going to be able to go there. That's not true.
Well, yeah, I think everyone's in a different place in their life, and
right.
You have to have your certain needs taken care of before you can work on self-actualization.
Right.
And luckily, in our current society, we have a quality standard of life that is so amazing.
Amazing. We're so wealthy.
Who isn't living better than your other grandparents were,
Yeah.
as far as lifestyle and stuff?
Definitely.
And it's kind of weird because you might say the past was slower, and now we have all this technology, so everything's so fast and moving so fast. But at the same time, we have it so well. We can watch Netflix. Who hasn't binged Netflix? I mean, such a guilty pleasure that we get to indulge in. But
right.
how can you say that things are so moving so fast we don't have time to binge an 8-hour series?
Right.
I mean, I guess we can't take a 3-month vacation. Those days are kind of gone.
Right.
But we don't, no one's got that
where
opulence.
people would be able to. They had a different time, but they also were doing something different with it, you know, and how they're using their time. But yeah, it was like all these modern appliances they do give you time, but then there's other responsibilities that you have to do. So maybe you want to think like, what do I really want? Because at the end of the day, all you have is time. That's really all you have.
Yep, and that's what the whole self-authoring is about.
How are you going to spend it?
Yep, trying to make a plan.
Yeah, figure it out. Well, I had a great time talking with you.
Yes, let's wrap it up. We're about 50% more than we usually do, so.
Oh, cool.
It's been
fun. I really appreciate you answering some of the questions on the self-authoring and some of the other stuff that you guys have gone through. Because, again, I'm really a total newbie, you know, so for me. Though I will say I think Arthur said, yeah, I've done like 40 hours on this. I was like, oh, I think I've already done more than 40 hours because I binge listened to Peterson. You know, just listening to Peterson on my way to and from work, it's been really bad because I was listening to my Certified Specialist of Wine stuff, and so it took a break, and then I haven't started back up. But you know,
happens.
Yeah, but it's a half an hour or more to get to work every day, so I'm doing at least an hour a day. You know what I mean? Easy. Not to mention other times where I have it on because I'm washing the dishes, or I'm taking a bath, or I'm doing other things that I can have it instead of music in the background that I used to listen to music to. I'm listening to Peterson, and it's funny because I do find it very relaxing in a certain way because I think it's like meditation. You go deep into this thought process, and it takes you away from all these other
things. And it's essentially because you could be doing a manual task like dishes. Like I'll be writing out code and listening. So like one part of the brain's doing one activity because you already had the conversation in my head about what I'm building. I'm just doing the actual going through the motions, just washing the dish, right?
Yeah.
And then I can I can turn in and listen and really think about it. It's very interesting how
fascinating, right?
Even though you're
two different things.
It's a very it brings you a peace because maybe you're realizing your potential then, or you're doing two things at once, so it's impressive.
Yeah, I find it very meditative. You know, I actually would say because I'm a third order Carmelite, I'm used to studying, different like St. John of the Cross or doing certain types of prayer with scripture. But I find that Peterson is because he brings you in to this. Even with his stories about the lobsters and stuff, they're humorous, but he's got an underlying meaning. He's always trying to get you to rise up.
And I think maybe that second activity it makes you more aware because it distracts one part of your side of your brain while the other side's now has less distraction. You can really listen in a way that you can't really listen if you were just sitting there.
Right, because otherwise I think I would get bored by it.
Right,
because I tried to do that.
Maybe
one
it's
time.
more of an ADHD problem, but
right. Well, I actually been having trouble with reading, so I was like trying to listen to it and then read and drop it, and it was way too intense.
There's so much about the brain we don't know.
Right, yeah, but it's fascinating because I actually have taken to listening to it over again in the car and then listening to it the same part in the car on the way home. And you wouldn't believe, I think I need to start writing it down because what I heard in the morning, then my brain's had time to it's been working on me all day, and then I hear it again. It's like I get a totally different meaning from it than I first was getting from it.
Yeah. That's one of the nice things. It's so densely packed that you can keep listening to it and get new pieces out or hear different things or tune into different pieces.
And the Bible series is so much that way. And the thing about the Bible series is it really dovetails into this beautifully, or it's like a tandem thing. And I'm not even sure why.
And it's so incredibly dense at the beginning, and it actually it's almost too dense. And I think eventually about halfway through the second one, it hits this pace that's really nice. And then you can really get understanding and meaning. I need to get further. I can't wait till we're done with part 2 of the biblical series.
Right. But I do think a lot of this goes in with this too, because you did some of this here,
when we did Rule 2 again,
this stuff was like a great backdrop because he talks about Genesis and Rule 2, so it all connects.
So it's all connecting there, yeah. Okay, well, very good.
Yes,
very fun,
we'll call it
Ryan.
there.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for everyone sticking around.